Think you've met Henry VIII, the portly Tudor monarch with 6 unfortunate wives and the nerve to split from Rome. Buckle up, traveller, because the classroom caricature barely sketches the monster who actually stalked Hampton Court. Our tale opens not in a banquet hall ringed with velvet banners, but in a private chamber that stinks of infection. The year is 1546. Inside, the king's groans mingle with the rasp of sawed oak. Carpenters are reinforcing a chair with pulleys, leather slings, and iron winches. It isn't for ceremony. It's the only way England's ruler can be hoisted to his feet without snapping the servants' spines. They heft him like a sack of grain, but the grain sack weighs 400 pounds and leaks rancid fluid from leg wounds wide enough to swallow a fist. Courtiers stationed 2 rooms away dab rose oil beneath their noses because the very air curdles around him. This, friends, is Henry in his final act. A sovereign decomposing before he's even dead. He wasn't always a nightmare. At 18 he was athletic, fluent in Latin, handsome enough for poets to compare him to Apollo. Then, 25 years later, a jousting horse crashed on top of him. Concussion stole 2 hours of consciousness and, many physicians now suspect, scrambled his frontal lobe. From that moment his temper grew volcanic, his appetites god-sized and his judgment lethal. The same crash split open his left thigh. Surgeons, gloved only in prayer, plugged the wound with linen and hope. It closed, then bloomed again and again, refusing to heal. Boiled poultices drew pus, but also drew flies. Each reopening deepened the crater until chroniclers described ulcers green as verdigris and foul as carrion. When Henry walked, he left droplets of himself on the floorboards. When he slept, attendants burned incense so thick the tapestries turned brown. Yet the king could never admit weakness. Royal proclamations insisted he was merry in health, and anyone who whispered otherwise risked a heretic's pyre. Physicians addressed him with trembling praise, while secretly cataloguing symptoms: moon-face swelling, mood swings, purple stretch marks across the belly. Modern endocrinologists call it Cushing's syndrome, the curse of a malfunctioning adrenal gland. Henry called it divine right. Whatever God chose to do with his body, no mortal dared contradict. The mind trapped in that festering shell spiraled into paranoia, especially toward the women who shared his bed. Catherine of Aragon loved him first, birthed his beloved but inconvenient daughter Mary, then bled through 7 heartbreaking miscarriages. Henry decided the fault must be Catherine's sin, or Catherine's age, or God's fury at a marriage to his brother's widow, anything except his own failing seed. So he petitioned Rome for annulment, received a resounding no, and replied by inventing the Church of England. Catherine was banished to damp castles, denied her daughter's embrace, and died alone, fingers ink-stained from letters Henry never read. Anne Boleyn glided in next, witty and electric, promising him sons. Henry showered her with emeralds, but when emeralds failed to conjure a male heir, his adoration frothed into loathing. Spies rifled through her prayer books. Torturers cranked musicians on the rack until they confessed to affairs that never happened. 5 men, including Anne's own brother, knelt before the axe while she watched from a tower slit. A swordsman imported from Calais ended her agony with one elegant swipe. Henry cheered the efficiency, feasted on roast swan, and declared the event proof of divine justice. Sweet-natured Jane Seymour bore him frail Edward and died of childbed fever before Henry tired of her. 9 days after her porcelain body cooled, the widower dispatched portraits across Europe, shopping for a 4th bride, as though selecting wine for the cellar. Enter Anne of Cleves, whose likeness flattered her. When the real woman reached Greenwich, Henry recoiled, branding her a Flanders mare. The wedding night remained virginal. He annulled the union by lunchtime, but Anne, shrewder than history credits, bowed, smiled, and left court weighed down by estates and pensions, neck blissfully intact. Catherine Howard, scarcely 17, twirled into the king's orbit next. She smelled of rosewater and youth, a scent Henry inhaled like salvation. Then gossip surfaced that Catherine had once giggled behind a curtain with a dashing courtier. Henry's pride metastasized into law. Any queen who hid a premarital kiss from His Majesty now committed high treason. Catherine trudged to the scaffold clutching a block of scripture, whispering that, like death would end the nightmare, her marriage had begun. Finally came Catherine Parr, clever, brave, and determined not to die. She debated Protestant theology with Henry, diffused his tantrums with flattery, and organised his vast library while counting the exits in every room. She survived by treating the king like a beloved but rabid mastiff. Feed him praise, avoid loud surprises, never run. While wives navigated terror, Henry gorged. Daylight meant dining. A normal Tudor commoner chewed coarse barley bread and onion broth. Henry devoured mountain ranges of flesh, whole boars bronzed on spits, deer pies sealed beneath buttery lids, barrels of oysters, rivers of malmsey, towers of sugar-glazed marchpane shaped like mythical beasts that nobody dared slice until His Majesty stabbed first. Contemporary account keepers measured a typical Hampton court Christmas. 13 oxen, 12 sheep, 3 stags, 200 pigeons, and 600 gallons of ale, gone inside 8 days. He insisted certain foods lent superpowers. Roast swan would make him graceful, venison courageous, and oysters virile. So the kitchens, 55 rooms roaring with hearths, laboured non-stop. 3 professional tasters sampled every platter, then waited half an hour under armed guard. Only if their hearts kept beating did footmen carry the dish forward. Dinner often lasted 4 hours. Courtiers stood in perspiring velvet, bowing each time the king raised a goblet, pretending not to hear the wheeze in his breath or see the sweat halo darkening his doublet. Paranoia salted every swallow. Henry installed spy holes along corridors so he could watch servants whisper. He built secret passages twisting beneath bedchambers, escape routes in case invisible assassins flooded the galleries. At night, he slept encased in chainmail stockings, a crossbow cocked within arm's reach, daggers hidden under pillows stuffed with lavender. 4 yeomen of the guard patrolled inside the royal bedroom, forbidden to sit or blink too loudly. Outside, another ring of soldiers eavesdropped on each other, because Henry ordered spies to watch spies to watch spies, a human labyrinth where no one knew who betrayed whom. Even his daughters fell under suspicion. Mary, devoutly Catholic, stayed silent lest her Latin prayers be mistaken for plots. Elizabeth, precocious and ginger-haired, learned young that relacing a bodice too often invited charges of seduction. Both princesses lived like eggs balanced on swords, grateful merely to breathe. And then, finally, came the finale. The king trapped in scarlet hangings, his body rotting faster than priests could mutter comforts. February winds rattled the casement while embalmers smothered him in lead sheets, poured pitch to seal seams, bolted wood around lead, and prayed the carcass would stay put. It didn't. 4 days later, the funeral procession rolled through frosted fields toward Windsor. Near Sion Abbey, mourners heard a wet pop, lead split. Gas, rank as plague pits, burst out. Black fluid dripped along wagon boards and spattered the mud. Chronicler Edward Hall writes that stray dogs scampered behind, licking at what leaked from England's most powerful corpse. Gravediggers enlarged the stone vault twice. Still, the ground sagged under the bloated load. Parishioners swore that on humid Easters, foul vapours rose through St. George's Chapel floor tiles, as though the king's fury refused to stay buried. Several pallbearers succumbed to septic infections within a month. Superstition blamed a Tudor curse. Rudimentary science suggests bacteria hitchhiked from the ulcers that had poisoned the monarch for a decade. So ends Henry, supreme head of the Church of England, terror of wives, devourer of banquets, architect of his own misery. He left a realm richer in monasteries' gold, but poorer in souls, a fragile heir, and a recipe for civil war. More than that, he left an odour, literal and figurative, that clung to Tudor memory for generations. Portraits linger of the broad-shouldered Titan in cloth of gold, fists on hips, legs braced like a warship's prow. Now, whenever you see that image, remember the worms already gathering beneath satin hose, the servants gambling to avoid wound dressing duty, the coffin waiting to explode. History books may polish him into a Renaissance icon, but here on Unfortunate Histories, we scrape away the guilt to expose the gangrene. If this descent into royal rot twisted your stomach and rewired your view of the past, go on, tap that subscribe button. We've barely cracked the crypt of humanity's darker chapters, and trust us, the odor only gets stronger the deeper we dig.